Hey everybody, Greg Cazillo, Cazillo.com. Let's talk about available light portraits and how I like to work, my equipment, my settings, and where I get some of my ideas. One of the people, whether it's on Facebook or a comment or something somewhere, somebody said, well, you know, talk about the pre-shoot and what you do before and how you set your stuff. So let's talk about that. Number one is figure out where you want to shoot and how you want to shoot it. Your style of photography has a lot to do with where you go, how you shoot it, and the way you do everything that you do. You might like the traditional photos that I love of photographers like Yusuf Karsh or Monty Zucker, people like that. But then again, you might like some of the newer guys, the newer photojournalistic guys, and so you're going to go after their style instead. So it all depends on what you're trying to create. Now, while I'm on the subject of style, I personally think that your style comes from the images that you like, the images that you want to create, the images that you've been influenced by, the ones you look at the most. Do you watch one television show versus another, or one type of movie versus another? I think that has a lot to do with your style of photography. My style is very traditional, and so this is just the way that I like to do things. So it doesn't mean that you have to do it, it's just the way that I like to do it. So that's how you're going to hear it. It doesn't mean that it's the wrong way, because like I said in previous videos, there is no wrong way in photography. And if anybody tells you different, they're full of crap. Now, your settings on the camera: shutter speed, aperture, and ISO. All right, those are the first three things that we need to set on our camera. Start off with a shutter speed. What I like to do in available light setting, and again, that's only available light. Flash is going to be a little bit different because I need to adjust more things in flash, and I'll get into that in another video. But start off with available light portrait setting that I may do. All right, I'm going to start off with my shutter speed at 200th of a second, and then I'm going to have my aperture at f2.8, or maybe f4 if I needed a little bit more depth of field, or if I had multiple people in the shot. Why am I at 200th of a second? To minimize, number one, camera shake, and number two, people shake. People are always moving. They don't stand still very well. So I need to make sure my shutter speed is high enough that they're going to be perfectly sharp. In fact, tack sharp in there, because anything less than tack sharp to me is a junk and a trash photo that gets deleted very quickly. Next thing, on the opposite side of that, is our aperture, because I want the stuff in the background to be blurry. I want it to be blown out. I don't want it to be perfectly sharp and look, I want there to be separation and compression of that background. All right, so I'm going to shoot at f2.8, maybe f4, to give me more separation between the background and the foreground, to get it nice and blurry in that background. Last thing is ISO. How do I set my ISO? What do you think it should be? Do you think it should be ISO 200, 400, or 800? What do you think it should be? Tell me. Guess right now. Did you guess? What was your answer? Your answer should be it's relative to the scene. It does need to be as low as possible, but it's also relative to the scene. On a day like today, I would probably have my ISO around 400. But you know what? If it was a very bright sunny day and I was shooting, say, 4, 5, 6 o'clock in the evening, I'd probably be, at 200. But then as we get later in the day, then I need to be up to 400 and 800 as the amount of light goes down. All right, high enough to give me a really good exposure. It's going to be right on. Oh, and by the way, always checking your histogram. Here's a link to the histogram video. Make sure you check that out. And so check, keeping that ISO high enough and going up and down depending upon the scene. So the next thing I'm thinking about is my lens choice. And this to me is probably the hardest part of photography, but then as you do it, it gets so much easier. Because people say to me, well, what lens do you shoot for this? What lens do you shoot for that? There's no hard and fast rules that I can say, yeah, use this for this or this for that. But my preference for a portrait setting is to always use my 70-200 2.8 lens. This is why I think that everyone needs to have one of these lenses, because it's one of the most flexible lenses that you have and that you can purchase in your and keep in your bag. You can be at 70mm, which is wide enough for a portrait of you know, 8 or 10 people, and you know, still being at a comfortable distance. Or you can zoom in to 200, get a nice tight headshot with just a single person. You can zoom in enough, and then being at 2.8 or maybe f4 in the lens allows you that flexibility and that full range of, do I want to be all the way down at you know, 2.8 so I have a really blurry, or do I want to be at f8 or f11 so that everything's in focus? So you have to have one of these lenses, and once you have one, you're like, oh my goodness, how did I ever live without this lens? You realize that it's your go-to lens, and it's the one that you're always going to grab for, you know, 90% of your portraits. I did a session just the other day. It was an indoor portrait session in their house. I thought it was going to be outdoor, but then we had a bunch of rain, and so we couldn't be outdoor. So I ended up using strobes and a few things indoor. So I had one camera with my 70-200 on, and I had my other camera with the 24-70 on, just in case. I have that luxury. A lot of people don't have the luxury of having two bodies, and it's completely understandable. But still, my first go-to lens was that 70-200. Even in an indoor situation, that's where you start. All right? Gives you a blurrier background, more separation in between the subject and the background, and that separation you just can't get with other lenses. Unless you're really, really close to the subject with, say, a 24-70 lens or a 17-55, you can't get that separation. You can't get that really blurry background. Same with a 50mm lens. There really is no replacement for a 70-200. So that's my go-to lens for almost all of my portrait work. So, two more things that I want to talk about today. Number one is camera position. To me, a standard headshot is a photo where it's just a single person. It has a little bit of headroom above the person, not a whole lot. They're not right in the center. You want their head or eyes on the top third line of the image. And then you show the rest of their body, especially in a vertical photo. That's a standard headshot. You want to have your camera angle just a little bit above their eyes. That's the best position that I've found. So I'm not down low shooting up at them. I'm not real high shooting down. It's just above their eye level and shooting straight into them. All right. That's the place where I would say you should start. All right. You start off by getting a few of those, then work into your other angles. All right, you never know if the person is self-conscious about one thing or another. Gentleman might be balding. You know, woman might not like her chin or something, or her neckline, or whatever it is. And so you always want to have different angles, a little bit different position, whether it's higher, lower. Turn your head to the left, to the right, up and down. That's something big that I always do, is positioning the head. When I'm the head and the body, turning the body to the side, never being straight onto the camera, or very, very rarely being straight onto the camera. And then use the head left and right, up and down, and then tilting the head, finding that good position for each individual person. Last thing is focus point. Just about every camera today has some way of modifying the focus points that are in the camera. Now, I know I'm spoiled with, I think it's the 52 or something like that, that are in my D3 and D3S, but every camera has them, so use them. All right, use those focus points, manipulate them, move them around, so that you are sure, or let me rephrase that, so that you are minimally focusing and then recomposing. You don't want to do that a lot. You only want to do that minimally. All right, so you move the point to as close as you can get, focus it on the eye, focusing on it on the face, and then only having to recompose slightly. Since you only have to recompose slightly, you're going to minimize any focus issues, the image going out of focus when you do recompose. And that's especially true when you're using, say, an 85-1.4 lens or even a 70-200 lens real close, because your depth of field is so shallow and so thin that you need to be sure that you're right on and tack sharp. As I mentioned before, tack sharp is the only way to go. You know, don't distribute images that aren't sharp. You know, the last thing you want to have is somebody say, "Oh, my picture I have, it isn't sharp. Can I, you know, I want a 16:20 of that." Don't even put it out there. My thought is that the images that you put out need to be as good enough to put up, say, in a magazine or on the cover of Time or New York Times or something like that. Any image needs to be good enough, or almost your very best, to be able to put them up. All right, so keep that in mind as you're working through your images. Don't put up the second best stuff, only the best. And if it's not that great, reshoot it, do it again. You'll be glad you did, because you'll have learned something. All right, Greg Casillo, Casillo.com.